By now, we know all the accolades, the many of them, and the situation with Chris Benoit, the tragic deaths of the Benoit family. So I'm going to be doing this one a little bit different today. What's up, guys? Brett Mix here for another Saturday in Memory of video. I didn't really know how to tackle this one, and I wasn't necessarily sure about doing it, but everyone has a right to their opinion on this, so I figured I am as well. This video is not a memory of what is, it's a memory of what was. I can't stress that enough. It's not a tribute to a murderer. Everyone knows this story well, so I won't need to go in super depth, but I wanted to express my feelings on the matter. Nowhere in this video will I ever justify murder nor give it an excuse. However, there is so much not known about CTE that it's frightening that's just a fact. I've heard things like, if he was so brain damaged, how could he wrestle? Well, for one, it was so routine he could probably wrestle in his sleep. But secondly, the fact that thought he was being followed on his way home showed that he had brain trauma similar to that of the 80-year-old with Alzheimer's. He would ask his driver to take different routes home because he thought him and Daniel were being traced. There are people that with CTE that have violent outbursts or amnesia. My grandfather used to have violent outbursts and then forget what happened 2 minutes later. You could look at AWA promoter Vern Gagne. He's a good example of that. Usually it's not murder, but it's possible. I think Chris either had that happen to him where he didn't know what was going on and he was in a violent rage, and then the guilt was too much that he committed suicide after realizing what he had done. And he didn't want his son to see what he had done either, so he decided to do that both and then take himself out. Or I feel he was already suicidal, but got pushed over the edge that Friday night with whatever Nancy and him are talking about. But then again, he lived his whole life based on respect. So the guy couldn't stand one more second on this earth with the guilt. Why he did what he did on Saturday, we'll never know. But the placements of the Bibles and the sedation, the Xanax he gave Daniel so he wouldn't be awake during what happened, at least showed he was somewhat conscious and aware of what was happening on Saturday. Perhaps Nancy's death on Friday was one where he lost control of his mind, but the son's was planned, hence the Google search, and perhaps he wanted his son to be with him. We'll never know. Chris's story is so tragic because his end was nothing like who he was. His father Michael and other son David to this day maintain that. They both have said it wasn't him or his true self. What's interesting is there are a few people in the Hall of Fame right now in WWE who have killed others, and if they have been forgiven. But does that mean I think Chris should be in the Hall of Fame? No. Of course not. I'm just saying a lot of other people who weren't so perfect in their pasts even get tributes. And again, this isn't a tribute to the man he became. It's just a video remembering the man that was. And also to remember Nancy Benoit before it all ended so tragically. It just happened to be Chris Benoit's turn this week, and I thought I'll do Nancy and Chris at the same time. That way I don't have to go over this incident twice. You guys all know the details pretty well of the tragedy. I don't need to go into that, but the first thing I think about when I hear the name Benoit right now isn't killer. Interestingly enough, I think great technical wrestler before I think murderer. But hold up. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's more important. I'm not saying that the Chris we got introduced to and loved, we didn't know the other guy. So it's only natural for our minds to connect with what we do know. We as fans only know them as wrestlers as they are in the ring. So we don't really know their personalities behind the scenes. So it's not that surprising to think that I think of a good technical wrestler when I hear his name first. I'm not saying that that's what you have to remember him for. I'm merely saying that's just what my mind goes to. If it wasn't for CTE, I probably wouldn't even have Chris's picture up here at all. It doesn't excuse anything, but maybe it gives us a better glimpse of understanding what cannot be explained. In the end, there's no justification for murder. There is a reason why there's an insanity defense, though, out there in the legal system. If one has no idea of what they're doing, one shouldn't be held accountable. That's what the insanity defense is all about. It only works about 1% of the time, and if Chris had gone to prison, and had lived, we wouldn't know it. We wouldn't know for sure that he had that. It's impossible to know if this is what happened with him because, as I said, dementia, reality can be altered. In 1 minute you know what's happening, and the next you don't. Even to this day, his own son said, "People need to understand this wasn't him." He is still looked at as a hero by his own son David. It showed what kind of man he was before it all went wrong. And to me, that's the real tragedy. He worked so many decades for respect, all of it, sacrificing his body, mind, spirit. Then the same thing that killed the Benoits was all of the shots to the head and entertaining us through the years. It's hard to watch how often Benoit didn't protect his head. Even today, it's extremely hard to watch in matches. I never initially liked how the police ruled it a double murder-suicide right away, but after all the evidence, it's clear that that's exactly what took place. Chris Benoit to me lost his mind truly when he broke down in his tribute to Eddie Guerrero. That to me was the beginning of the end. I'll never forget seeing them together after a live event in Kelowna in August 2002. They both hopped in a rental car right next to me, a Chrysler. Eddie was shirtless with a white towel around his neck, and Chris Benoit had his shirt and shorts. I have a really extremely good photographic memory. And to think 5 years later they'd both be gone is mind-boggling. Their careers were linked and parallel each other. I just hope they're in a better place. Nancy Benoit, woman, was a great manager. Going back doing the Monday Night Wars right now, reviewing on my channel. I'm having a great time doing them. And Nancy, you can see how pivotal she played in those early Nitro events, managing the likes of Flair, Benoit, and others. What happened to her is tragic, and she could have been a part of the Hall of Fame if it wouldn't reopen wounds this case has caused. This case killed wrestling for a lot of people. Those months were so dark when this happened. I remember having stomach issues and being in the hospital in a dark place when it happened. I called up my brother from the hospital to ask him about the NHL draft and anything else that was going on in the world that I might have missed. I never phrased things like that either, so it was weird that I phrased it that way because he had a story for me. He told me all about how a wrestler did this to his wife and son and didn't tell me who it was right away. And like Jericho, when hearing the story, Benoit was the last guy that came to my mind. But the second I heard his name is the second I thought about Kevin Sullivan. I just thought, how long ago did they divorce because of Chris? 10 years? That's the perfect revenge plot. To wait 10 years and then make it look like Chris did it. And to only kill the only son of the marriage of those two. Because David was with another family. I don't know. I just thought symbolic, Satan worshipping guy, Sullivan. But that's what I wanted to believe more than that's what happened. Chris's son, David, who's still the surviving son, David, who's still alive, he said that he had the authorities take a look at Sullivan and cleared him of any wrongdoing. So I'm not trying to reopen the can of worms there for that conspiracy theory. There is no conspiracy theory when it comes to that now. It's pretty clear what happened. I think a very healing and therapeutic way to deal with this trauma for wrestling fans is to watch David Benoit's interview with Chris Van Vliet. No matter what happens or no matter what anyone thinks, this thing to be true. This situation is the most tragic situation in wrestling history. There's the Von Erichs, there's Owen Hart, and there's this. A kid was robbed of his life for reasons we will never know before he could even be a kid. Nancy was robbed of her life for no good reason. And Chris destroyed his and theirs for reasons we will never know. The only glimpse we have is that his brain was scrambled and he had dementia. You can say right now to this day, screw Chris Benoit. Rest in peace, Nancy. I won't argue with that opinion. I see it everywhere. But we all have the freedom of choice and speech in this country. I would like to remember both for the good, and that's it. There's enough bad in this world to remember. It doesn't mean I'm rewriting history or rephrasing history or reframing what happened. All it means is I'm thankful for the years of entertainment these two gave me, and I choose to remember them in a positive light. It's the same entertainment they gave us as the same entertainment that killed them. It's nothing short of tragic. That is something we can never forget. May their whole family, all of them, rest in peace. Till next time, I'm Brett Mix.